All right, jury's back. Please be seated. Ms. Jensen, call your next witness, please.
Tammy Dunkin.
Good afternoon. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Are you nervous?
Yes.
Okay. Just take a deep breath, breathe. Okay. If you need
Okay.
a break, let us know. Will you state your full name for the record?
Tammy K. Dunkin.
And Ms. Duncan, where are you employed?
I'm employed at Department of Homeland Security.
Okay. And is that at Pensacola NAS?
Yes.
How long have you been with DHS?
We came in 2010, so almost 10 years.
Okay. Prior to DHS, did you work for the Department of the Navy with David Flatt
Yes, I did.
and Richard Smith?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you do for DHS?
I'm a computer specialist.
And are those the same duties that you had back in July of 2015?
Yes.
Did you know Richard Thomas Smith?
Yes.
And how long did he work for the government or civil service?
He would have had 25 years that August, so he's 1 month shy.
And in 2015, how would you describe your relationship with Richard? In other words, were you close? Were you not close? Were you acquaintances? How would you describe it?
He was my best friend.
Did you let me back up. What is your GS level?
I'm a GS 14.
Okay. And that's the same as David Flatt and Richard?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Did you and Richard see each other every day at work when you worked normal work hours?
Yes.
And after work, did you and Richard either talk on the phone or text? Did you have some sort of contact?
Yes, we usually always texted.
Okay. And was that daily or how often was that?
Usually daily, maybe not on Sundays, but most of the time it was every day.
And how often would you and Richard either talk or text in the evenings?
In the evenings, it could be anywhere from like 7 till about 10 or 11 at night, off and on.
Before Richard's death, had you ever been to his home on Deerfield Drive?
No,
Did he ever invite you over?
no.
Okay. Did you and Richard hang out much outside of work?
We did a couple times.
Okay. Was there any particular reason why?
It was usually like on a holiday or something we met for breakfast, and then we went to the Christmas party like that, that Christmas before.
Okay. Any reason that you two didn't hang out more? Like, was he busy at home or?
He was usually at home or having to do something with his family.
Okay. Did you and Richard go to lunch?
Yes,
How often?
almost every day unless one of us was off.
And would David Flatt typically be with you?
Yes.
What type of car did Richard have?
He had a Highlander. It was white.
And do you know if it was older, newer?
I believe he had gotten it a year before, so I believe it's a 2014.
Okay. Did Richard have any cell phones?
Yes.
What did he have?
He had a work BlackBerry, and he had a personal. He had just upgraded to the iPhone 6 at the time. It had just come out.
And where did he, on his person or in general, where would Richard keep those phones?
He usually had his BlackBerry clipped on his belt, And then he normally was wearing jeans, or I guess it doesn't matter because they had pockets, so he'd always clip his iPhone on the pocket right there on the outside.
Okay. And would he sometimes carry it too?
He would carry it, like if he got into a car or whatever, he usually take it out because it would bother him because it's so long, you know.
Okay. I know I'm about to ask you for numbers, but I feel like you're a numbers person. Do you remember Richard's work cell phone number?
His work cell phone was 202-603-1223.
Do you remember his personal cell phone number?
850-356-1714.
Okay. Do you know if he had a home phone?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know that number?
It's 850-944-4670.
And when you would communicate with Richard after hours, which of those numbers would you use?
His personal, the 356.
Was Richard pretty routine in his daily activities that you saw?
Yes.
Okay. And how would you describe him if you were to describe his routine?
He was, to me, OCD.
And that would be, I guess, when you saw him mostly during work hours, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when was the last day that you saw Richard Smith at work?
I saw him on July the 28th of 2015.
And on that particular day, did you and Richard go to lunch?
Yes.
Was David Flat with you?
Yes.
And where did you guys go?
We went to Sonny's there on Navy Boulevard.
Do you by chance remember what Richard ate?
He would have had a hamburger or a barbecue pulled pork sandwich
Okay.
and French fries.
Was he pretty routine in what he ate when you guys went to lunch?
Yes.
And do you remember what kind of fries Sonny's had?
They have the crinkly cut fries.
After lunch, did you and Richard and David go back to work?
Yes.
Do you know about what time Richard left on July 28th, 2015?
We both left at the same time, me and Richard, and it was about 6:35.
PM?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Did you have any reason to believe that Richard was going anywhere but straight home?
No.
And do you know if he typically made any phone calls as a habit or as a routine on his way home?
He would always call his mom or the house every day.
Okay. Now, after you and Richard left around 6:35 p.m., did you see him after that?
Yes.
Okay. And just what was that circumstance?
Well, normally when we left, I was in front of him or he'd be in front of me, but as we'd go through, he'd usually speed a lot and he was gone.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you both typically drive home in the same direction?
Yes.
Okay.
We would go both mobile highway, and so I would turn off right before the foyer grounds, and he would keep on going.
Okay. And do you know what street he would turn? Was it right from Mobile Highway?
From Mobile Highway, he would have gone on to Klondike.
Okay.
But that particular day, I actually was following him, and at the different lights, I was actually keeping up with him. So
Okay.
he was not in a hurry.
And when was the last time that you actually saw him in his Highlander?
When we went, when we got to Mobile Highway, just past Fairfield, where the Walmart is that John works, he got into the left-hand lane. I went into the right lane because I turned into that shopping center and went to Subway.
Okay. And do you remember approximately what time that was?
That would have been somewhere between 6:45 and 6:50.
And why do you remember that particular time?
Because I have a receipt at 7 o'clock where I went to Subway, and there was nobody there, so I got my salad, got back in the car, and left.
Okay. And was that the last time that you actually saw Richard?
Yes.
Did you speak with, text with, communicate with Richard at any point later than 6:45 or 6:50 p.m. on the 28th?
Yes, I texted him about 8:30 to hope he had a good day, and he was going to be off the next day. So
Did Richard ever respond to your text?
no,
Was that usual or unusual?
that was unusual.
Would he normally text you back when you would text him?
Yes.
And back to numbers, what was your cell phone number back then?
850-380-9489.
So that was Tuesday, the 28th. The next day, Wednesday, the 29th.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Were you aware that Richard was scheduled to be off work?
He had told me Tuesday night that he was taking John to a doctor's appointment the next day.
Okay. So no surprise when he didn't come to work on Wednesday?
No.
All right. Now, did you have any contact with Richard on Wednesday, July 29th?
On Wednesday, about 2:30, I had texted him because we were having some issues with work. And then about an hour later, I texted him about 3:30 on another issue that was going on, and I got no response.
And again, was that usual or unusual?
That was unusual.
So that was Wednesday, the 29th. On Thursday, the 30th, did Richard show up for work?
No.
And in all the years that you had known him, had he ever not shown up from work without some explanation?
No.
So let's go to Thursday, the 30th. Did you have any contact with Richard on Thursday, the 30th?
I texted him about 7 o'clock, wanting to know if he wanted anything from McDonald's, and I got no response.
Friday, July 31st. Did you have any contact with Richard Smith?
On about 7:15 that morning, I'd stopped and got McDonald's and told him if he was going to be in, I had something for him, but I got no response.
David Flatt told the jury earlier that the lanyards or credentials that you guys wear to get in your building, that you're not supposed to wear those on your days off. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, what would you do with yours, like when you went to lunch or if you went to the bank or ran an errand?
What he would do?
No, you.
Me? I would either wrap it up, take it off, wrap it up and keep it in my car, or put it in my purse.
Okay. And what would Richard typically do?
Richard would either put it down in his shirt or a pocket, or he would make sure his credentials were upside, backwards to where it was just the back side of the credential so you could not see what it is.
Okay. Did Richard wear different clothes every day to work?
Yes.
Now, on Tuesdays, were you aware that Donald Hartung would go to Richard's house?
Yes.
And on Tuesdays, how did Richard seem about going home?
He was usually hesitant.
Would he stay late?
Yes, he'd usually be 6, 7 o'clock before he'd go home.
Okay. And would you sometimes stay with him?
Yes.
After Richard Smith left work on Tuesday, July 28th, 2015, did you ever have any contact with him again?
No.
Were you aware on Friday the 31st that Hal McCord was going to Richard's house to check on him?
Yes.
And did Hal actually, text you or contact you about getting a contact of Richard's?
Yes.
Okay. And did you give Hal McCord a contact?
Yes.
Who was that?
It was his older brother, which I knew him as Wayne, but Donald Hartung.
Okay. And where did you get, excuse me, where did you get Donald Hartung's information?
From Richard's dad's obituary that was back in January of 2012.
Okay. So it wasn't something you got from work?
No.
Thank you, ma'am. Those are all my questions.
Ms. Griffith?
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you some very brief questions.
Okay.
You and I have spoken before. Do you recall?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to go over some of the things that we talked about, if I could. You and Richard were close friends.
Yes.
But even though you're close friends, you never went to his house.
That is correct.
And did you ever meet his mother, other than at his father's funeral?
No.
Did you ever meet John other than at his father's funeral?
I didn't meet him, but I saw him off and on at Walmart on Mobile Highway.
But Richard never took you to meet John?
No.
And you never met my client, Mr. Hartung, other than at the funeral for Mr. Smith?
Correct.
Richard's father. Okay. Now, you indicated that Richard would work late on Tuesday nights. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, the truth of the matter is Richard cooked for his mother and brother John every night, didn't he?
Yes.
And the only night he didn't have to cook for them was on Tuesday night when my client Donald cooked for Mrs. Smith and John, correct?
Yes.
And he'd also leave food for Richard.
Yes.
So that was one night that he worked late when he didn't have to go home and cook. Is that correct?
He would stay a little bit later on Wednesday because John was not working.
Okay. And then on Wednesday night, he also stayed late because John wasn't working.
Correct.
And in fact, John didn't work either Tuesday or Wednesday, which were the two nights that Richard would stay late at work.
Correct.
And would you usually stay late at work with him on Tuesday and Wednesday night?
Yes.
So Richard was able to stay late Tuesdays and Wednesdays and able to catch up on work.
That is correct.
And he couldn't stay late the other nights because he had to pick John up at work.
Correct.
Now, was Richard an Alabama football fan?
Yes.
And would he watch football with Donald?
I really don't know. I mean, if Donald was off on the days they had football games, maybe.
Well, you talked about that Richard would sometimes get aggravated with Donald because they'd watch Alabama football games and Donald wanted to talk while Richard wanted to watch the game.
Yes.
And I think you said that when they would watch TV together, Richard would sometimes get aggravated because Donald would talk and Richard didn't want to talk, he just wanted to watch TV.
Correct.
Can you redirect?
You said earlier that Richard on Tuesdays would leave around 6 or 7, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, you said he stayed late on Wednesdays too. How late was late on Wednesday?
Usually on Wednesday, he'd stay probably about 5 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
May I give one bit of redirect?
Yes.
And on Wednesday, he had to cook for his mom and John Wednesday night because Donald wasn't there, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Thank you,
All right, thank you, ma'am. You can step down. All right, state call your next witness, please.
State calls Kevin Pallamino.
Good afternoon. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Good afternoon. Will you state your full name, please?
Kevin Pallamino.
And Mr. Pallamino, where are you employed?
I'm with the Department of Homeland Security, Federal Protective Service,
And can we call that FPS for short?
FPS, correct.
All right. And what does FPS do?
We protect federal employees, customers for the federal government, facilities, and government assets.
And do you basically provide law enforcement type services for the federal government?
Correct. We provide security and force protection through contract guards to include uniform police services and investigative.
Okay. How long have you been doing that?
I've been a federal law enforcement since this July will be 16 years
And in which state do you live?
in Texas.
Okay. Is that where you lived back in July of 2015?
Correct.
Okay. Now, were you assigned to investigate the death of a DHS employee named Richard Smith?
Yes.
And, is that you? Okay. Was there any special reason you were sent from Texas?
To see if there was any nexus with the crime to the federal government.
But any reason you came from Texas to Florida?
I believe I was the only one available within Federal Protective Service at that time as an investigative agent.
Okay. So no hidden meaning?
No.
Now, is it standard operating procedure for FPS to investigate deaths of federal employees?
Yes.
And was Richard Smith's job of any special concern?
No.
Is the death of any federal employee going to be investigated?
It will be.
Now, if the bodies were discovered on Friday, July 31st, 2015, when did you arrive in Pensacola?
The next morning.
And when you got to Pensacola, where did you go first?
Went to the crime scene.
And how did you know where to go?
I had spoken to investigator Matt Infinger with the Sheriff's Department the night before when I got notified through management to report to Pensacola.
Okay. And when you went to the crime scene on August 1st, was Matt Infinger there when you got there?
He was, and then departed to the medical examiner's office.
Okay. Now, what did you do at the scene?
I got briefed by the sheriffs on scene, and I told them what my interest was of looking for any nexus to federal government property or anything left behind for the federal government.
Okay. So basically, any kind of computers, phones, any kind of technology that was assigned to Richard Smith by the federal government?
Yes, initially just anything that would pop out, say, federal government.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was any government property found in Richard's home?
It was.
Okay. Now, did you actually go inside the house?
I did.
Okay. And how long were you there at the scene on August 1st?
I couldn't give you an exact time, but enough time for me to be briefed by the sheriff's office and do a brief walk through the crime scene of how everything was kind of laid out.
Okay. And then where did you go from the scene?
I went to Richard Smith's place of employment, and I spoke to his supervisor, Hall McCord.
All right. And while you were there, did you search Richard Smith's, I guess, workspace or work area?
I did.
Okay. Anything that raised any red flags?
Nothing.
Now, was anything about Richard's job in and of itself inherently dangerous?
It was not.
What types of government property were seized from Richard's home, car, or office?
You were talking about access cards to his workplace.
And is that the thing that he wore around his neck?
Yes, an ID card.
Okay.
Computers, laptops, and cell phone.
And what about this? There's David Flatt testified earlier about an RSA token.
RSA token, remote security access, it's just how you log into a computer.
Okay, nothing special about that?
No.
Okay. Were some of the electronics Richard Smith's personal property?
That we recovered,
Yes.
there were evidence of his personal property recovered.
Okay. And did he have a computer in his office at DHS?
Yes.
Was any government equipment unaccounted for Richard Smith?
No, we accounted for all government property that was assigned to him from DHS.
All right. And then were the laptops, the cell phones, the technology recovered, was it forensically analyzed?
It was.
And was that government property as well as personal property?
The Sheriff's Department asked us to do both,
Okay.
so we actually did both,
Okay.
personal and government.
And who actually analyzed the electronics?
Some went to the United States Secret Service in Jacksonville, some went to Office of Chief Security in Washington, D.C., and some went to Homeland Security Investigation in D.C. area.
Okay, why all those different places?
Well, some had better equipment to analyze certain things that he had, so we could get much of the information we possibly could pulled off those devices. We went to certain specialties that we had access to.
Okay. And was everything able to be analyzed or examined?
No.
Okay, what was not?
The Apple devices and one of his work computers.
And Apple devices meaning like his personal iPhone
Yes.
and maybe some iPads, I believe?
Yes.
Okay, and in your experience, is that common or uncommon to not be able to access Apple iPhones?
It is very common.
Was there anything of concern found on any of Richard's electronics, personal or work?
Nothing in concern or no evidence of the crime.
Now, if anyone tried to break into or hack Richard's work computer, what happens?
It becomes useless. In the computer field, they call it a brick. It becomes a brick, a paperweight. Can't do nothing on it. It has different layers of security.
How long were you in Pensacola working on this investigation?
I believe I arrived August 1st, 2015, and departed August 18th, 2015.
And based on your investigation, did you have any reason to believe that Richard Smith's work at DHS caused his death?
I did not.
Did you find any evidence that he was a target for anything related to his job?
None.
Excuse me. Now, does the building where Richard worked have video surveillance of the employees coming in and out?
It does.
And did you obtain a copy of the video surveillance from July 28th, 2015?
I did.
And did it show him coming to work, going to lunch, and then leaving that day?
It did.
Judge, my approach. No objection. Judge, so at this time I'd move states 361 into evidence.
So admitted.
And permission to publish?
May.
Watch your eyes. Can you by chance read that time up there in the left corner?
7:59 a.m.,
And again?
11 a.m.,
And again?
12 a.m.
AM?
Yeah, I believe it says a.m. Can't
Sorry.
really see it.
Okay, that's fine.
p.m., sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And the last time?
6:36 p.m.
Now, there was some testimony that there were some D-Link cameras found at the Smith home. Were those sent for analysis by DHS as well?
It was.
Okay, and what can you tell the jury about those cameras?
Well, the analysis determined that the D-Link notifications weren't turned on, and it's just pretty much a live streaming. He would actually have to log in to using his username and password to actually see the live feed of the camera footage.
Okay, but it was live feed only?
Real time.
Those are my questions. Thank you, sir.
Members of the jury, we're going to take a very short break, so I'm going to ask you to retire to the jury room. We'll be back with you shortly. Mr. Griffith, did you have any expectation you're going to go somewhere that the state is concerned? Okay. Do you want to proffer the testimony in courtroom 404?
Yes, that might be.
Okay. Then just counsel and the defendant and staff will go into 404 with the witness, and we'll be back shortly.